Stupidity destroys more than crime. A criminal has intent, knows they are doing something wrong. But the stupid, they act without realizing the damage they cause. And worse, they believe they are right. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a philosopher who stood against one of the most violent totalitarian regimes in history, realized something crucial. Stupidity cannot be fought with arguments or punishments. It spreads in authoritarian societies, strengthens manipulative leaders, and turns ordinary people into pieces of a dangerous game. Bonhoeffer witnessed firsthand that stupidity does not need monsters to thrive. It grows in the fertile soil of indifference and absolute certainty. And what if I told you that, while crime challenges us to confront it, stupidity challenges us to recognize it? Because before fighting anything, we must understand how it disguises itself, even within our own convictions. Evil, as destructive as it is, can be fought. It has logic, intention, and a clear objective. Those who act with malice know what they are doing and often hide their intentions out of fear of consequences. But stupidity, it is a chaotic, unpredictable, and self-sustaining force. It does not follow logic, does not care about evidence, and, worse, cannot be reasoned with. As Mark Twain warned, never argue with stupid people. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian and philosopher, observed that the greatest crimes in human history were not committed solely by evil people, but by those who, blinded by stupidity, followed orders without question. For him, stupidity was more dangerous than malice precisely because it could not be confronted in the same way. Against evil, we can use force, laws, and punishment. But against stupidity, these methods fail. The stupid person does not reflect, does not accept facts that contradict their worldview, and often feels superior in their own ignorance. Unlike the malicious individual, who at least acts with some calculation, the stupid person causes harm without even realizing it. They can ruin a society, destroy reputations, and perpetuate injustices with a simple vote, an impulsive share, or blind adherence to a baseless narrative. Another problem is that stupidity is resistant to education. Intelligence is often associated with the amount of knowledge acquired, but this is not true. Some of the brightest minds in 20th century Germany were complicit in atrocities, not because they were ignorant, but because they refused to question what they were doing. Heidegger, one of the greatest philosophers of the century, supported the German dictator and never showed remorse. This means that a person can be extremely intelligent and, at the same time, profoundly stupid in a moral sense. The true root of stupidity lies in the lack of intellectual autonomy. The stupid person does not think for themselves. They absorb ready-made ideas and repeat them without critical analysis. They do not seek to understand, only to reinforce their beliefs. And when confronted with the truth, they do not yield to logic. Instead, they retreat even further into their conviction. And that is why stupidity, in the end, is more dangerous than malice. Evil needs stupidity to thrive. No tyrant rules alone. No propaganda spreads without an audience willing to accept it. No lie endures without those who blindly repeat it. The great danger of stupidity is that it not only destroys the present, it prevents us from learning from the past. If an entire society refuses to think, reflect, and question, it is doomed to repeat the same mistakes. And at that point, there is no more effective villain than an army of people who believe they are right, without ever having asked themselves why. But do not be mistaken. The blindness of stupidity is not an individual failure. It finds refuge where doubt is treated as betrayal and obedience becomes a kind of collective addiction. And so, quietly, what once seemed like a simple human flaw transforms into the machinery of something much larger, something that, at certain moments in history, has even worn the face of normalcy. How can an invisible force shape entire societies? The answer lies where we least expect it. Stupidity is not just an individual problem. It spreads and strengthens within certain contexts. The ideal environment for its proliferation is an authoritarian system. The logic is simple. Oppressive regimes do not only need ruthless leaders, but obedient followers. Totalitarian governments do not emerge out of nowhere. They are built upon a collective inability to think critically. This system thrives when people abdicate their ability to question. The leader does not need to persuade, only to repeat simple slogans that trigger emotional responses. The complexity of problems is replaced by ready-made phrases. External or internal enemies are created to keep the population in a constant state of alert. And the illusion of security makes people trade their freedom for the convenience of not having to decide for themselves. Germany's propaganda during World War II did not succeed because people were ignorant in an academic sense. Germany was one of the most educated countries in the world at the time. It worked because it encouraged conformity, made the masses feel they were on the right side of history, and punished any form of dissent. Many Germans, even highly educated ones, accepted the regime because it was easier to follow orders than to challenge a system that seemed unshakable. This pattern is not exclusive to dictatorships. Even in democratic societies, stupidity can become a tool of control. When the population is constantly bombarded with misinformation, distractions, and simplistic narratives, critical thinking becomes rare. And the less people think, the easier they are to manipulate. Politicians exploit this by reducing complex debates to catchy slogans, creating artificial divisions, and promoting an environment where questioning is equated with betrayal. Another key issue is that stupidity does not need to be enforced by force. It can be cultivated voluntarily. People prefer to believe what is convenient, what reinforces their beliefs, and what makes them feel part of a group. When a system encourages this kind of thinking, it produces citizens who not only accept oppression, but actively defend it. Perhaps the most dangerous aspect of stupidity in authoritarian systems is its resistance to truth. When an entire society commits to a false narrative, even in the face of clear evidence, few dare to challenge it. The fear of exclusion, punishment, or simply the discomfort of being wrong makes people cling to the lie. As a result, truth becomes irrelevant, and at that point, stupidity has already won. Looking at the world today, the mechanisms may have changed, but the principle remains the same. Stupidity thrives where intellectual autonomy dies. But is there a breaking point? A moment when society looks in the mirror and realizes that, unwittingly, it has fueled its own downfall. Stupidity is not an isolated mistake. It is self-sustaining. Once embedded in a society, it becomes a vicious cycle that is difficult to break. The less people think for themselves, the more vulnerable they become to manipulation. And the more manipulated they are, the more they reinforce the same misguided ideas, spreading them to others. Dietrich Bonhoeffer observed that stupidity does not just survive in groups, it strengthens within them. The herd mentality effect turns ordinary individuals into fierce defenders of ideas they might never have accepted on their own. In a group, people feel less need to justify their opinions. Questioning disappears, replaced by a sense of belonging. And when that happens, any narrative can be accepted, no matter how absurd it may be. Propaganda is one of the main fuels of this cycle. It does not just present a distorted view of reality, it does so in a way that discourages doubt. The more emotional the message, the more effective it becomes. Fear, anger, and outrage are weapons used to control the masses. If a lie is repeated enough times, it becomes an undeniable truth for those already inclined to believe it. Another key factor in maintaining the cycle of stupidity is social reward. Those who align with the dominant thinking receive approval and status within the group, while those who dare to question are ridiculed, attacked, or marginalized. This fear of rejection causes many to go along with the flow, even when they know something is wrong. This phenomenon can be observed in both authoritarian regimes and modern democracies. Fake news spreads rapidly because people share what confirms their beliefs without bothering to verify if it is true. Extreme ideologies gain strength because they provide simple answers to complex problems. Politicians and leaders exploit this mechanism to consolidate power, creating imaginary enemies and dividing the population. And so, the cycle continues, stupidity generating more stupidity. In the end, people do not just accept being manipulated, they actively defend those who deceive them. The only way to break this cycle is to shatter the chain of conformity. Thinking for oneself means going against the tide, being willing to ask difficult questions, and accepting that the truth is rarely simple. But as long as the majority continues to choose the comfort of ignorance over the challenge of reflection, stupidity will keep prevailing, repeating, and renewing itself, generation after generation, creating yet another monster. The most dangerous individuals are not the ignorant, but those who are absolutely convinced they are right. Blind conviction is one of the most destructive forces in the world. The most stubborn in their stupidity are not necessarily the least intelligent, but those who shut themselves off from any possibility of being wrong. This explains why even great thinkers can fall into ideological traps. The case of philosopher Martin Heidegger is a classic example, one of the most influential intellectuals of the 20th century. He was unable to recognize the monstrosity of the regime we mentioned earlier, even after witnessing its atrocities. His loyalty to the regime was not driven by ignorance, but by an unshakable belief in the greatness of that ideology. Politics, religion, and even science are not immune to this problem. When an idea becomes a dogma, something that cannot be questioned, it becomes dangerous. History is full of examples of people who committed atrocities not because they were evil, but because they believed they were on the right side. Wars, persecutions, and totalitarian regimes have always relied on the unwavering certainty of their leaders and followers. The irony is that the more someone believes they have all the answers, the less likely they are to be truly seeing reality as it is. The real antidote to this trap is doubt, questioning our certainties and avoiding the arrogance of infallibility. Those who recognize they might be wrong are always seeking more knowledge. Those who believe they own the truth have already given up thinking. But how can we avoid falling into the trap of stupidity? The only defense against stupidity is critical thinking, and that begins with the willingness to question everything, including our own beliefs. Many people confuse questioning with rebellion, but doubt is essential for seeing reality clearly. The greatest risk lies in the passive acceptance of information. To avoid this, ask yourself, does this make sense? Who benefits if I believe this? Many manipulative ideologies survive because people fail to ask these questions. authority must also be scrutinized. Leaders who discourage questioning are a red flag. Those who genuinely seek the greater good encourage debate. And beyond questioning others, it is essential to question ourselves. Human bias leads us to seek only information that confirms what we already believe, making us victims of our own ignorance. The world is full of dangerous ideas disguised as absolute truths. Stupidity thrives where independent thinking dies, and nothing kills intellectual autonomy faster than herd mentality. When we are surrounded by a group, there is an invisible pressure to agree, to fit in. The problem, this makes us act without realizing we are being manipulated. In a crowd, people adopt behaviors they would never engage in alone. They chant slogans, spread hatred, and follow leaders without questioning. When everyone around us believes in something, it feels easier to simply go along. But this is the trap that strengthens collective stupidity. Before following any idea, ask yourself if it's something you truly believe or if you're just going along with what has been imposed on you. If you never disagree, if you never feel uncomfortable with the opinions around you, beware. You might just be going with the flow. Reality is complex, but stupidity thrives where people seek easy answers. Whenever someone points to a single culprit for everything, be skeptical. Simplistic narratives are comforting, but they make us manipulable. The world is not simple, and solutions are not easy. If an explanation ignores nuances and blames only one factor, it is not seeking truth, it is selling a convenient story. The most dangerous form of manipulation does not force you to believe something, it makes you stop questioning. Fear and anger are used to weaken critical thinking, rallying people against a convenient enemy. If an idea demands blind acceptance or treats any disagreement as betrayal, it is not seeking truth, it is seeking control. Effective propaganda does not inform, it commands. Protecting yourself does not mean distrusting everything, but developing a filter. Those who recognize manipulation avoid falling into collective stupidity and maintain their freedom of thought. Stupidity is not a flaw. It is a virus that has toppled empires, fueled atrocities, and today wears the mask of viral posts, polarization, and political correctness. It does not start with dictators or hate speech. It starts with you repeating what you never dared to question, sharing what you never had the courage to verify, and hating what you never tried to understand. Every time you trade doubt for dogma, thought for hashtags, and dialogue for attacks, you are digging the grave of democracy and handing the world over to opportunistic demagogues. History does not repeat itself by accident. It repeats because people prefer the painkiller of ignorance over the surgery of reflection. Be careful not to become a puppet of algorithms and toxic leaders, because the future will not be destroyed by bombs or pandemics, but by billions of people who found it easier to shut off their brains than to face the reality that truth hurts. Freedom requires struggle, and collective intelligence only exists if you refuse to be just another sheep in the herd. If you enjoyed this content and want to dive deeper into life's big questions, subscribe to the channel and share this video with others who are also among the awakened.